Hello again, boys and girls. So I'm going to read the next chapter of The Gigantic Giant Goof-up by Sarah Courtauld. And this is chapter 22, in which Too Big has breakfast. Despite it being so early, Too Big was in a cheerful mood. Some people, and even some giants, get nervous before competitions, but not Too Big. He knew he was going to win the brawl for all. He just had to practice a bit of terrifying bellowing and a little light axe flinging, and he would be all set. Best of all, he had received a good omen. A great, big, juicy pigeon had flown into his cave in the middle of the night. He had plopped the plump little creature into a cage, and now it was hanging from the ceiling, just waiting to be grilled. Yes, it was going to be a wonderful morning, and he couldn't wait to get out of there and start thumping and crunching and whacking right after one last nap. And there is Lavender hanging from the ceiling of the cave. Eliza, on the other hand, was not having such a happy morning. First, she had woken up on the floor of the cave to find that the holy snail was missing. Then Eliza, Bonnet, and Gertrude had started to search for the holy snail. Eliza had tried to get the prince to help, but he would not wake up. Meanwhile, from inside her cage, hanging far above them, Lavender let out a series of melancholy coos. "Don't worry," Eliza whispered up to her. "We're going to find the snail, and then we'll get you out of there." Luckily, Too Big and Chewy were snoring away like angry hippos again, and Nibbles was lying on the floor, purring loudly as she snoozed. So they looked and looked, but in the darkness, they could not find the snail anywhere. There was one place they hadn't looked, on top of Too Big's breakfast table. So Gertrude shimmied up onto the tabletop faster than you could say, whirling dandy trousers, with Bonnet and Eliza on her back. "As long as they don't wake up," Bonnet muttered as they crept over the table, "everything's going to be uh-oh." For that was the moment the snoring stopped. Then Too Big stretched, yawned, shook his head, and plodded over to the breakfast table. "Breakfast time, Chewy," he shouted, tossing some logs into the fire. "Wakey, wakey, it's my big day." On the tabletop, Eliza, Bonnet, and Gertrude stood completely still as Chewy ran over to the breakfast table, grinning. If he sees us, Eliza thought, then that's it. We'll be done for. We'll be breakfast. She looked around for a place to hide. There was a bowl of salt on the table. As Too Big threw some drumsticks into the fire, Eliza, Bonnet, and Gertrude climbed into the bowl, took a deep breath, and then dived into the salt. "What do you want for breakfast, Choo Choo?" said Too Big. "Chicken beaks? Oxen ears? Shark steaks? Freshly grilled pigeon?" Inside the salt bowl, Eliza's heart skipped a beat. "Freshly grilled pigeon? Pigeons are yucky," said Chewy. "Chicken beaks, please." "Suit yourself," Too Big replied. "I'll have the pigeon later. It will make for a tasty victory snack." Eliza wanted to breathe a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, she couldn't breathe any kind of sigh at all. She couldn't hold her breath for much longer. "Please leave," she thought, as Too Big dug his spoon into the salt and lifted Bonnet out. Bonnet froze with fear. He clung to the spoon and tried his very best to look like salt. Luckily for Bonnet, Too Big was still a little bit sleepy. He wasn't paying that much attention as he sprinkled salt all over his drumsticks, and he didn't notice a thing as Bonnet jumped off the spoon and ran to hide behind a nearby mug. Then he lay down on the tabletop, doing his best impression of a fork. "Right," said Too Big. "Time to prove what I always say. If at first you don't succeed, hit everybody harder," said Chewy. And "might is right," said Chewy. And "if you can't beat 'em, bash 'em," said Chewy. And, well, that's it, Eliza thought. She couldn't hold her breath much longer. If she opened her mouth, she'd get a mouthful of salt. Nearby, she could hear Gertrude making small, spluttering sounds. Is it better to suffocate in a bowl of salt or get eaten by a giant? Neither of them sounded that much fun. Oh well. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Gertrude. Goodbye, Bonnet. Goodbye, Lavender, sister, friend, and pigeon. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but clubs and spears are spikier, Chewy said joyfully. That's my girl, roared Too Big. Come on, let's show the world who's boss. Then Too Big stood up, plucked his favorite club off the wall, whirled it in the air, and set off out of the cave. Chewy ran along beside him, whirling her much smaller club in the air. Inside the cave, Eliza and Gertrude gasped as they burst out of the salt. Gertrude shook herself and sneezed, spraying salt everywhere. We're alive, Eliza grinned, and they have gone. And that is a great fork impression, Bonnet. Eliza wanted to celebrate, but there was no time to waste. She had to get her sister out of the cage. She climbed out of the salt bowl and shimmied down from the breakfast table on Gertrude's back. Then she pulled out her bow and arrow. Now all I have to do is slice through the rope, she explained to Bonnet. Then the cage will fall to the floor. I'm sure it will be fine, said Bonnet, unless you shoot your sister in the head. Thanks, Bonnet, said Eliza, or in the foot, or in any other part of her. Just try not to shoot her. I'm sure you won't, he added, sounding not very sure at all. Thanks, Bonnet, said Eliza. She shut one eye and focused on the rope. Do not miss. Do not miss. But just as she was about to release the arrow, Bonnet cried out. Nibbles, he yelled as the hideous beast sprang towards them. Eliza turned to look, and as she did, she accidentally released the bow. Pyong! Bonnet and Eliza watched helplessly as the arrow soared through the air. Time seemed to slow down as it sped closer and closer to Lavender. Missed the cage by an inch, and sliced the rope above the cage in two. The cage tumbled through the air, landing squarely on Nibble's head. Clang! The beast let out a hideous squeal and shot from the cave. And as the cage crashed onto the ground, it broke open, and Lavender came hopping out of it, cooing appreciatively. Lavender, cried Eliza. Coo, Lavender replied. Now all we have to do is get that snail, said Eliza. It's got to be here somewhere. Then we can turn Lavender back to Lavender and get home. So they searched under Chewy's bed. They searched through the glowing embers of Too Big's fire. They troweled through Too Big's gigantic pile of dirty tunics and through Chewy's box of broken toys. But the snail was nowhere to be seen. That's it, said Eliza miserably. It's gone. We're never going to get home. And Lavender will never be Lavender again. Coo, cooed Lavender. Bonnet sat down next to Eliza. This can't have happened, he said. It hasn't happened. But it has happened, and there's nothing to be done, said Eliza. Everything's ruined, and it's all my fault. We're all going to be eaten. We might not get eaten, said Bonnet, trying to be hopeful. We might get squashed first. Good point, said Eliza. Grrr, grunted Gertrude in agreement. Eliza stared down at the ground as a shaft of sunlight lit up the cave. Odd, thought Eliza. My mind must be playing tricks on me. Last night she was seeing stars on the roof of the cave, and now in the warm morning light she was seeing stars on the floor. Was it her imagination, or was the floor sparkling? Bonnet, she said quietly, look down. What? Said Bonnet. When he looked down, all he saw was his small, hairy feet. Like many things in his life, they frightened him. No, Bonnet, look at the floor, said Eliza. Look, do you see the sparkly path zigzagging across the floor? Mm-hmm, said Bonnet. Suddenly, Eliza was on her feet. Don't you see, she said, that silvery path? It's a snail trail. The Holy Snail's trail. We just have to find out where it ends. If we find the Holy Snail, we can make the third wish, and then we can go home. So they followed the sparkly trail across the floor and back again, and up Two Big's wall of weapons, where the trail looped and zigzagged and stopped. That's the space where Two Big's club should be, said Eliza with a shudder, which means that the Holy Snail is on Two Big's club, said Bonnet. Then we've got to get to the snail before he smashes it to pieces. And that is the end of the chapter. I hope you enjoyed that. Have a good day.